While most people wake up like they're being dragged into the day, tossed into routine, lost in noise, Napoleon Hill did the opposite. He didn't just open his eyes. He awakened with purpose. Hill believed the first few minutes of your morning are the most powerful, because that's when your mind is still pure, untouched, still echoing in silence from the dreams of the night. And in that tiny window of time, you get to plant the seeds of your future. And he did, every single day, before any outside noise, before reading the news, before saying a single word to anyone. Hill would close his eyes and quietly affirm, "Today, I am the master of my mind. Today, I am the captain of my destiny." It was like a secret code, a quiet reminder that no matter what the world threw at him, he was in charge. He wasn't going to let the world decide how he should feel. He decided. Hill started his mornings by writing. But not to-do lists, not appointments. He wrote about the man he wanted to be. He painted a picture, crystal clear, of the version of himself he intended to embody, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. This practice had a name, autosuggestion. It was his most trusted tool, because he knew the subconscious is fertile soil. Whatever you plant in those first quiet moments grows, be it hope or fear, strength or doubt. While the rest of the world woke up complaining about life, work, or the weather, Hill had already won his first battle, the inner one. And that victory was invisible. But it was everything, because how you start your day determines how you carry it. He didn't need applause, didn't need witnesses. He just needed that sacred moment, the one where the world was still and his mind was fully his. Before the first sip of coffee, before the first letter opened, before the first word spoken, he had already programmed himself to be focused, disciplined, unshakable. This wasn't mysticism. This was practical science. A conscious decision, self-mastery in motion. He understood a simple truth. If you don't take control of your mind, the world will. And the world, more often than not, offers fear, distraction, and doubt. So Hill stepped in first. He claimed the most sacred territory of all, his own thoughts. And that, as simple as it may sound, was one of the master keys that shaped the man who inspired millions. Because long before Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill mastered something else, the art of mastering himself. His success didn't begin in books. It started in the silence of morning, at quiet moment when he chose to be stronger than his excuses, stronger than his past, stronger than the world. You want to change your life? Change the way you show up in the first few minutes of your day, because that's where everything begins. Now you know what Hill did, while the world was still asleep. Napoleon Hill didn't believe in luck. He believed in quiet preparation. He knew that the greatest empires are first built in the mind, and that's why, before facing the world, he would sit and speak to something no one else could see. Hill called it his invisible counsel. It was a practice he invented, a mental ritual. Each morning, he would enter a vivid scene in his imagination, a room filled with history's greatest minds: Thomas Edison, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Carnegie, men he deeply admired, all seated in front of him in the theater of his mind. And he'd ask them questions, seek their guidance, observe their reactions, study their wisdom. To many, that would sound insane. But to him, it was training, mental alignment, a sharpening of the soul. He understood. If you want to think like the greats, start talking to them, even if only in your imagination. This practice honed his clarity. It supercharged his creativity and elevated his mind far above the noise of the ordinary. More than that, it built identity. He no longer saw himself as just a man trying to make it. He saw himself as part of a lineage, a torchbearer of timeless ideas. an heir to ancestral wisdom, and that changed everything. It changed his posture, his focus, his ability to carry pressure without crumbling. Because deep down, Hill understood something powerful. The way you see yourself determines what you tolerate. If you see yourself as small, you accept less. But if you see yourself as a giant, you bow to no one. This invisible counsel wasn't a game. It was a spiritual discipline, a connection to the energy of greatness. And you didn't need to believe in anything mystical to make it work. It was a mental strategy, a way to model excellence, to install new patterns, to replace fear with vision. Napoleon Hill didn't wait for life to go his way. He conditioned himself for it long before stepping into the battlefield. It was a sacred ritual, a moment of clarity in the quiet before the world woke up. He used it to clear the path before taking action. And it was this practice that helped him hold on to his sanity when everything else seemed to fall apart, when doors slammed shut, when criticism echoed louder than encouragement. When rejection felt like a daily routine, Hill returned to his counsel, not of people, but of vision, a place inside his mind where he remembered who he was becoming. That was the key. He didn't act based on who he was in that moment. He acted based on the man he was building, and that made all the difference. While the world searched for motivation in bite-sized videos, feel-good quotes, or promises of overnight success, Hill built his own power source. He didn't wait for something external to light his fire. He was the fire. Now, that kind of responsibility? It scares most people, but for him, it was freedom, because it meant he was in control. He didn't have to beg for opportunities. He could create them. And it all started in the stillness of morning, in a quiet, ordinary room. No audience, no applause. No likes, just him, a sheet of paper, a focused mind, and the deep conviction that he was sitting among giants. That one day, he'd be one of them. Hill didn't walk out the door, hoping the day would be kind to him. He walked out to conquer it. His morning rituals weren't just habits. They were the foundation, and the effect? Unmistakable. While others hesitated, Hill moved. While others second-guessed, his decision was already made. Because for him, choice didn't happen in the heat of the moment. It happened early in the mind, in the silence, in the invisible. He wasn't a slave to how he felt. He didn't react to what the world threw at him. He acted according to what he'd already chosen to believe, and that made him unshakable. Steady under pressure, clear in the face of criticism. Yes, he faced rejection. He went hungry. Publishers ignored his work. Ideas were shelved. People mocked his philosophy. And still, he pressed on, not because the world told him he was right, but because he had already made a decision. He wouldn't be shaped by the noise around him. He had already heard the voice that mattered most, his own. And that kind of power? It's born from the simplest choices, but the most consistent ones. He woke up at the same time, spoke the same words, imagined the same images, and reinforced the same identity. That's how you turn a habit into armor. That's how you transform a morning routine into a shield against mediocrity. The world tested Napoleon Hill, but he was ready, because he trained before the fight. And that is a lesson most people never learn. You don't prepare during the battle. You prepare before. In the quiet, behind the curtain, when no one's watching, when nothing seems to be happening. That's where greatness is forged. And that's where Hill built his strength, mentally. What you think, you become. But he didn't just repeat that line. He lived it. He watched his thoughts like a farmer watches his fields. He guarded what entered his mind. He chose what fed his soul. And that's how he kept his energy stable, even in the middle of chaos. When life got heavy, he didn't spiral into panic. He leaned into focus. He returned to the page. He rewrote his goals. He reinforced his mental picture of success. He revisited his invisible counsel, and he asked, what would Edison do right now? What would Lincoln choose in this moment? What advice would Carnegie give me today? Those questions weren't fantasy. They were direction. They replaced fear with strategy. They transformed insecurity into decisiveness. Hill understood. Failure only becomes real when you believe it's the end. But he didn't. He believed failure was a teacher in disguise, an invitation to sharpen the vision, to adjust the course, to fortify the mind. And that's how he survived decades of uncertainty. That's how he kept going, even when nothing in the physical world justified such unwavering faith. Because he had a pact with something greater, a sacred agreement with his mission. And that pact was renewed every single morning in silence. While the world chased shortcuts, Napoleon Hill moved with consistency. While others chased money, he chased purpose. Because he knew, money is a side effect of an aligned mind. Throughout the day, Hill was selective with everything, with the words he used, with the conversations he entertained, with the people he allowed into his energetic field. He understood a careless comment could disrupt his entire vibration. An innocent doubt could chip away at his confidence. So he didn't leave that to chance. Hill was firm, polite, yes, but direct. He didn't waste energy trying to please everyone. He didn't accept invitations that weren't aligned with his mission. He said no without guilt. He cut distractions without hesitation. Why? Because he knew exactly where he was going. And when you know where you're headed, you don't get lost in detours. Hill designed his days with precision, not a prisoner of a strict schedule, but always clear on his priorities. He knew what came first: mindset, vision, service. Even when afraid, he kept his rituals. Even when drained, he sat down to write. Even without motivation, he moved into action. Because he understood the human mind is like a field. If you don't plant, the weeds grow. And the weeds of the mind are fear, doubt, and comparison. That's why, on the hardest days, Hill doubled down on discipline. He woke up earlier, stayed longer in silence, wrote with more intensity. He knew strength is born from repetition, not luck, not emotion, but decision. And on those days, he always returned to the essential. Why did I start this? Who can I help with this message? What is the universe trying to teach me here? These questions would reorder his soul. They would reconnect his mission to something greater. Because Hill understood. His life wasn't just about him. It was about the thousands of people who would one day read his words, who would need that exact sentence, that insight, that awakening. And so, in that spirit, he kept going, even without knowing if it would ever work, even without applause, contracts, or guarantees. He kept going, because the calling was stronger than the exhaustion. And that shifted everything. He was no longer just a man with a goal. He was a channel for something greater. And when you step into that place, strength comes. Clarity returns. Direction reveals itself. On his worst days, Hill wrote with deeper purpose. He spoke to himself with greater compassion. And instead of falling, he rose. He rose mentally, spiritually, energetically, because he had learned something few ever do. You are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to do with what happens. And that choice he made every day, even when no one was watching, even when no one understood, even when everything screamed, "Give up." He didn't, because he had already chosen to be loyal to his vision. Years passed, and that man who once wrote for no one became the author of one of the most influential books of the century, Think and Grow Rich. A book that crossed generations, that inspired millions, that changed lives. And it was born not from applause, but from silence. From choices made when no one was clapping. From mornings built on discipline and vision. And maybe that's your message today. That greatness doesn't start with the spotlight. It starts with what you do before anyone is watching, before the results, before the recognition, before the reward. Maybe your most powerful work is being written in the dark, in the early hours, in the silence of your own discipline. Because like Hill, you're not just building a life, you're shaping a legacy. One thought at a time, one choice at a time, one morning at a time. So if today feels heavy, if the doubt is loud and the results are quiet, remember this. Don't negotiate with your vision. Don't argue with your calling. Don't wait for permission to start, because no one will believe until you do. No one will act until you act. No one will rise, unless you rise first. And that's the true power of a decision made in the silence. It echoes across generations. It plants the seeds of something eternal. It writes the sentence that someone someday will desperately need to hear, just like Hill once did. And just like you might be doing right now. Hill didn't get there by accident. He got there because he became a magnet for what he was seeking. He didn't ask for results before he was ready. He became the kind of person who attracts results. And that was the greatest lesson of all. The success you're searching for isn't hidden in magic formulas. It's not about luck or perfect circumstances. It's in how you start your day, in what you say to yourself when you wake up, in the vibration you choose to feed, in how you act when no one is watching. If you want to change your reality, start by changing your morning. It's not about waking up at 5 a.m. because it's trending. It's about waking up and remembering who you are, why you're here, what you want to co-create with the universe. Write, pray, Visualize. Breathe with intention. Speak with power. Feel gratitude before the results come. And above all, act, even when afraid, even without motivation, even while doubting. Because movement creates clarity, and consistent action changes your frequency. Napoleon Hill once said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But he didn't stop at the quote. He acted on it every single day, especially on the hard days. And you can do the same. Not tomorrow, not after everything's perfect, but today, in the next hour, in the next thought, in the next decision. Your transformation begins the moment you choose to act like the person you already are, and stay loyal to that version until the world has no choice but to see it too. The universe responds to the frequency of your certainty, and life rewards those who plant even when the soil feels dry. Now, take a deep breath. Feel it. See who you can become. And do what Napoleon Hill would do. Stand up and begin with power.